Hi, are you looking to create margin in your finances? Are you looking for that first step to gaining wealth? Hey, I am going to share with you a timeless wisdom on how to do such things. Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Dan Can, and welcome to the Dan Can Show. This is a show where we learn to provide, protect, and promote. In addition to that, we invest in ourselves, others, and real estate. Isn't that amazing? What a plan. If you want to ever invest with me after this, please visit my website, investwithdancan.com. I truly enjoy investing in others and real estate. We start our show with this wonderful little thing that I call Dan Can Musings. We'll jump into how to generate wealth here in a minute. And so here it is. Now, this is personal but funny as well. My wife is amazing, and her favorite holiday, it's amazing. Her favorite holiday, it's not her birthday. She does love Christmas, okay, but it's not her favorite. Her favorite is the 4th of July. Isn't that amazing? So, 4th of July is her favorite. And we try to do something special for the 4th of July every year. And so this year, I live in beautiful Spokane, Washington, which is right next to beautiful North Idaho. And we rented a lake place on Hayden Lake. We'd never done that before. And it was really amazing. But here's the funny Dan Can music. I've known in our family to purchase clothes and wear them for decades. And I know that sounds funny, but it's just how I am. I've had these swim shorts, the same swim shorts for 7 years. And I figured, hey, I'm going to buy some new swim shorts for this vacation. So I went and bought the most expensive swim shorts I've ever bought in my life. But that's another note. And I wore them. And I'll just say that I felt a little uncomfortable because they were a little shorter than what I was used to. And so I had asked Lisa, hey, are these shorts too short? And she laughed and she said, no, you're a product of the 90s where long and baggy shorts were in. And I said, okay, that's fair. But then I looked at her and I said, I feel like I just stepped off the set of Magnum PI. If Magnum PI, he wore some pretty short shorts. They were not that short. Okay, that's our Dan Can musing. I'm also going to throw in a pointless fact. Many of us are in sales. Many of us are business owners, or we have an audience that we're trying to communicate to. Obviously, the word content is really a big thing in regards to the marketplace. I did a book report last week on The Ultimate Sales Machine. That was the name of the book. Fantastic book. Please read it. Go back to the other episode. We only actually went over the first 3 chapters of the book. I'm continuing to read on this subject. And I got to tell you, I want to read this. This is in regards to email marketing. Raise your hand if you have an email. Raise your hand if you have 3 emails. Okay. So we've all received something in our email, right? Listen to these crazy stats. Here it is. There are 2.4 billion emails sent every second. There are 2.4 billion emails sent every second and 144 billion every minute. Of those, 8% are spam. That's 11.5 billion spam emails every single minute. That's amazing. If you are in sales or if you are in business, I would encourage you to generate an email list. Man, if you are in sales and business and you want to increase your wisdom or knowledge and self-study, once again, I'm talking about it. Please buy The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes. It's just such a fantastic book. I have really been encouraged. That information in regards to email marketing, obviously, I don't want to focus on the spam part as much as I want to talk about how essential marketing and bringing value to your email list is huge. And that's actually the meat and potatoes of the article. But I thought that was amazing. 2.4 billion emails are sent every second. Okay, we're going to jump into next after a fantastic word from our amazing sponsors is how to take your first step into creating margin in your financing and creating generational wealth. I'll see you soon.
Want to earn passive income without becoming a landlord? At Invest with DanCan, accredited investors tap into exclusive off-market real estate deals in America's fastest growing regions. With expert local teams and proven systems, you get double-digit returns without the headaches of property management. Ready to build real wealth the smart way? Join us today. Provide, protect, promote.
Welcome back. Okay, so I mentor some young men here in the community. We meet on Fridays, and I spend a lot of time thinking and preparing about what that looks like. And one of the things that I found is a lot of these young men are just starting their marketplace journey. And I view the marketplace, I view providing as an opportunity to start a journey, to complete the journey. I'm going to be 50 years old pretty soon. I've had about 25 years in the marketplace, but some of these young men, they're just getting started. And one of the things I've noticed in these young men, and you might find this to be true for yourself, is there's actually a fear or almost an angst in regards to wealth. There's this negative connotation to it. And man, I thought, man, I want to hit this. I want to get this out the door. This is not true. And I used to think that way too. Now, listen, you don't want the love of money to drive you by any means. However, you can radically serve a community and get paid well for it. And the Bible clearly states a workman is worth his wages. And what I did is I talked to one of the gentlemen. I said, hey, listen, let's do this. Let's get a time outside of this. I want you to buy this book, The Richest Man in Babylon. Now, listen, this book, it's a classic. Obviously, there's no way I can tell you with every book that I agree with every last thing it says. Okay, there's just nobody can do that. But I will say that there are some fantastic principles that I think are a really good idea. So he bought the book. We got together, and this gentleman's 22 years old. We're talking about the book, and he is just pumped. He's loving it. And I asked him, I said, hey, why do we want to study wealth? Now, this gentleman, he went through high school, he went to college, he's going to college, he has all these things. And he said, why would I study wealth? And I thought, wow, why would you not want to study wealth? Like wealth, finances, budgeting, it affects every day of your life. And I asked him, I said, why wouldn't you want to study wealth? And he said, why would I study something I don't have? And I thought, whoa, okay, we got to address something here. Wealth is not bad. Having excess is not bad. How you go about it might be bad. What you do with your wealth might be bad. But wealth in itself, having margin is not bad. And I talk to a lot of people that don't have margin. And I can tell you that's not a good space. I spent time in my life where I didn't have margin. That was not a good space. And so to begin this first step in our journey with gaining wealth, we have to realize that money is not bad. The love of money is bad. The Bible is really clear. You can't serve God and money. You just can't, right? But you can serve God and have money. Now, you got to put God first, in my opinion. If you put money first, you're going to go down a ditch, in my opinion, then you're not going to like it there. So the first step in regards to gaining wealth is this. It's not bad. And if you disagree with me, that's great. But I'm just going to say it's not. Outside of that, what's that first step for you to be able to try to gain wealth? And this is where kind of the rubber meets the road, if you will. The first step in gaining wealth, and if you have a journal, you might want to write this down. The first step in gaining wealth is a spirit of self-control. Boom. Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Dan. I didn't know that. But actually, do you know that? Because if you're not doing it, you don't know it. That's pretty simple. You have to have a spirit of self-control in order to gain wealth. I'm going to talk about one practical step that if you do this for 6 months, I guarantee you, you will not be upset at me. And so the first step is self-control. Now, if you're a believer, if you profess that Jesus Christ is your Lord, Galatians 5 talks about the fruit of the Spirit. That means the Spirit's inside of you. That means that you have a spirit of self-control. Now, listen, I don't know if anyone you've ever talked to has referenced spirit of self-control in regards to your finances, but I'm going to do that. And so if you want to provide, protect, and promote in your family, you have to have a spirit of self-control, and you have to have a availability to provide, but you also need to have margin. And so your first step outside of the spirit of self-control, your second step is this, is you want to save 10% of all you make. That is yours to keep. That's what it says in the book, The Richest Man in Babylon. Now, if you're a believer, I believe you should give or tithe 10% to your local church. There's debate about that with certain people. I don't debate that. I believe it should be done. And so you give 10% to the church. Now, I'm informing you to then pay yourself 10%. Okay, so if you give the church 10% and you give yourself 10%, that leaves 80%. Now, this is the part where people say, I don't have the margin in that. Guess what? You need to create it. That's how you gain wealth, is you have to sacrifice. And that's why people don't have wealth, because it takes two things. It takes self-control and sacrifice. Those are great. Those are two great things, but you sure don't hear a lot of pop songs about those things, do you? Because it's not easy. It's a timeless wisdom. And that's what this show is about, is gaining and receiving and giving away timeless wisdom. It says, the Bible says in Proverbs 3:3 that the book of Proverbs is about living a disciplined and prudent life. I don't know about you, but self-control and saving is definitely in that category of discipline and prudency. I want to hear about your success. If you if you put away 10% for 6 months, that will be your first step to creating margin. You can't invest unless you have excess. Oh man, if I was jumping up and down right now, that would sound really good. You can't invest unless you have excess. And you got to create that by having a spirit of self-control, and you got to have discipline, right? And you got to have a plan. So the first step to your plan is to save 10%. That is yours to keep. That comes straight from The Richest Man in Babylon, and it also comes from a spirit of self-control. Okay, what I'm going to run into next time here is some fun stories about some treasures or wealth that me and my real estate partner have found in properties that we buy off market. And I can tell you, there's going to be some funny stories coming up after a word from our glorious sponsors.
One accident can change everything. Are you covered? At DanCan Insurance Agency in Spokane, we protect what matters most: your family, your car, your peace of mind. Get a free quote in under 60 seconds. DanCan, because you can count on us. DanCan Insurance Agency specializes in auto, home, motorcycles, and life insurance. Call us today at 509-328-1422.
All right. As we buy off-market properties, single family mostly, here in beautiful Spokane County and also Kitsap County. Kitsap County is where I was born and grew up. Spokane County is where I moved in 2010 and been here ever since. Hey, these off-market properties, I can tell you, most times there's not treasure. There's no wealth inside these properties. Usually it's a bunch of trash. But sometimes you do find treasures, and that can help you gain wealth. In fact, when you take over a property, once people leave and they vacate, you can throw that stuff away or you can sell it. Now, listen, most of the times we're filling up dumpsters and dumpsters of stuff. However, sometimes you find cool things. My real estate partner bought a house, and it was a gentleman that unfortunately had passed away. They bought it from the relatives, and they didn't want anything to do with it. They were just like, hey, you get everything, write us a check. We don't want to do it. Apparently, this gentleman who had lived there prior, he was a coin collector, and he left all of these coins, rare coins, all over the property. But they were like under couches and magazines and paper. It wasn't like just pick up coin. They were buried basically. And oh my word, did they get a lot of excess by taking those coins. And I believe he sold them, or I think he kept some of them just because they were rare. Isn't that amazing? A funny little treasure I found that wasn't necessarily of any value to me, but a funny story is I was at the auction. This happened about 6 years ago. I was at the auction. We call it the steps. I was at the steps. I bought this house. It was off of Jefferson Street in my favorite zip code, 99205, Shadle. I love investing in that area. And so bought the house, and oftentimes the water is turned off. And so in order for the water to be turned on, the utilities county need to come out, city, and turn on for you. I hadn't even walked the house yet. And so we have the house. I meet the gentleman from utilities there, and we go in, unlock the door, and it's trash. There's stuff everywhere. Turn on the water main. You got to go downstairs. So I'm walking with this gentleman, and he's a city employee, and we're talking or whatever. And we walk downstairs, and the downstairs is full of marijuana plants. Now, I never walked the property before, so this is the first time I've seen it. So I look at the plants, and then I look at the employee, and I said, "Those aren't mine." And he started laughing, and he said, "Yeah, I know those aren't yours." We got to throw those away, turn on the water, all the good stuff. The final story in regards to finding little treasures is oftentimes people will leave abandoned cars, vehicles, and those are a whole nother thing. Like, you got to obviously get title. You try to give them back to the people, but they're like, "Hey, I don't want anything to do with them." So I have heard, I have never done this, but I have heard of investors where there is a process where after a certain amount of days, you can actually get retitled on those and own those properties. I, in my experience, have not done that. The most that we've ever done is just sold trinkets and things like that, like furniture that is still usable and all these other things. But the off-market world, man, I could tell you, the house in itself is a treasure, but then also inside of the house, you can find treasures such as marijuana plants, coins, and vehicles are some of them. Okay, when we come back, I'm going to wrap up our wonderful episode about how to build wealth with your first step in your wonderful journey. We talked about emails. We talked about off market. We talked about taking a first step in your journey to building wealth. I love doing this podcast because I get to share timeless wisdom. What I believe comes from the Bible and books that I read. I want to reach into my notes here, and just something that was pretty profound. I was talking to my wife about this episode, and we come to this conclusion, and we're still working it out, but you can serve God and have money. You can serve God and have money, but you can't serve money and have God. That's my statement. Now, I believe that you definitely could challenge me on some of these things, but the heart of the matter is what really matters to me right here. Is if your heart is to serve God, and through that, do that with excellence, like Colossians 3:23, I believe states, do everything as if it was the Lord's work, that you will be successful. But you can't let money be the reason for the success. That's very shallow. It doesn't work. However, to have margin, you have to have self-control in your finances. I believe the best way to do that is to save 10% of what you make. And if you're at a place where you're at a deficit, I would encourage you to really look at your expenses, and then I'd encourage you to increase your top line revenue. Most people call that income. Business owners call it top line revenue. You can do that. You might have to get a second job. You might have to sell some things, but you can do that. And once again, you can't invest unless you have excess. And that is something that is very much within your control. I believe that as men, as leaders, as business owners, our role is to provide, protect, and promote. And we can do that by having a sure financial statement and a sure foundation of having margin or safety. I really appreciate you listening to the DanCan Show. As always, DanCan listeners, love and do good. Thanks for your time.